Hi, and welcome to Love on the Autism Spectrum Season 2. If you're a regular listener, please feel free to jump to about the minute and a half mark to skip this introduction. If you're new here, I want to say I'm your host, Barbara Lazzaroni, licensed marriage and family therapist, neurodivergent coach, and creator of the Neurodivergent Spiral of Life. Please call me Blaze. All my friends do. This podcast is for autistic adults, adults with ADHD or complex trauma, and the partners who love them, as well as neurodivergent couples, especially those who are tired of being told to communicate better, try harder, or fix themselves in systems that were never designed for how they're wired. Here, we slow things down. We talk about real relationships, real nervous systems, and real life without fixing, pathologizing, or rushing your process. I bring clinical experience along with decades of lived relationship experience to create a calm, emotionally intelligent space where nothing about you needs to be defended, explained, or justified. Each episode is an invitation to understand yourself, your partner, and your patterns with more compassion, clarity, and choice. We make lots of room for nervous system safety, emotional truth, and the patterns that actually shape neurodiverse relationships without blame, pressure, or performance. This isn't therapy advice. It's lived experience, clinical wisdom, and steady support for those of us who are wired differently. So take a breath, settle in. I am so glad you're here. And just a quick note before we dive in. This podcast is for reflection and education, not therapy. Licensing doesn't create a therapeutic relationship, and I'm only licensed in the state of California. Any client examples I share are purely fictional, and all of the tools or stories are meant to support your self-reflection, not replace personalized care. If you're in crisis or need immediate support, please reach out to a local professional or call 988 in the United States. Okay, now let's get to today's episode. Welcome to episode 9, entitled When You Say Yes But Feel Invisible, Understanding the Fawn Response. So let's take a moment just to slow down together. This podcast is for the person who says yes and feels invisible, for the partner who carries the emotional labor, for the adult who learned early that being agreeable felt safer than being honest, for the neurodivergent woman who became fluent in everyone else's needs before she understood her own. Today, we're talking about the fawn response, not as a weakness, not as codependency, and not as personality, more as protection. So when we review Spiral Layer 1, it's all about safety, identity, and self-believability. So before we can change our patterns, we need to understand why and how they formed. The fawn response is the nervous system strategy of staying safe and staying agreeable. It can look like over apologizing, over explaining, over functioning, emotional labor no one explicitly asks for, and it is emotional labor when people do ask sometimes too. Saying yes while your body quietly says no. Trauma therapist Pete Walker helped name fawn as a survival adaptation where appeasing others reduces perceived threat. So, for many neurodivergent people, especially those diagnosed later in life, fawn becomes an advanced masking strategy. It works until it costs you your visibility. So, let me share a little bit of an individual story. A client once described herself as quote unquote easy, flexible, low maintenance, helpful. But when I asked what she actually wanted in her relationship, she went quiet. She said, I don't know. Honestly, that wasn't indecision, it was adaptation. Her nervous system had learned that expressing needs disrupted safety, so it chose compliance. Not because she lacked strength, because she valued connection. That distinction matters. She valued connection. So when we think about, especially the first four of the eight stress responses, like I can say that easily today, they're fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. So remember, most of these decisions were made when you were a kiddo, right? And you chose the best one. And as a kiddo, you can't really flee, can't um, take flight. And, if you try and fight, you usually have a bigger, stronger person that would say no. So freeze and fawn, the two hypo conditions, actually show up a lot when we're younger. And I find many, many women, because of the social construct that we live in, fall into a place of fawning. So I want to make sure I reduce this stigma and remind women, especially, and the men that are listening to this as well, fawn is not something that you should be ashamed of. Remember, the reason that you're fawning is because you want the connection. Yeah, you're people pleasing. So let me tell you a little story about a couple. So in couples, I very, very often see one partner over functioning. They do the planning, the tracking, the soothing, the anticipating. Lots of times, again, this is a gross statement, but many times it is the female in the relationship. If it's a heterosexual couple, um, either she has ADHD and or she has embraced the fawn response. They become the emotional regulator, especially for their partner and the family. And over time, their resentment quietly builds, not because they're selfish, because they're disappearing. So when we name fawn as a protection stance, not a personality, the shame actually softens. And once the shame softens, choice becomes possible. And so, again, so often, like I said, in the couple, it is the female, sorry again, who is the one that is over functioning. And by the time clients come to me, which is typically in midlife, somewhere around their late 30s, 40s, even 50s and 60s, the female is exhausted. She is so tired of fawning and trying to hold it all together. And usually she's the one that calls uncle first and says, hey, we need to go see someone. So, from a clinical standpoint, I want to share this psychoeducation. The fawn response blends attachment and survival. And it's so important for me to share this on this podcast from the layer one of the neurodivergent spiral of life that I created. We have to understand these patterns. That's what I want to share with people, whether you work with me or not. I want you to learn these concepts. So the fawn response definitely blends attachment and survival. It often develops, like I said, when we're young, we're kiddos, and it develops in environments where emotional intensity felt unsafe. Being difficult led to correction, like you're being told you're bad, you're broken, you're wrong. And that connection with a primary caregiver many times felt conditional, like you have to do something for me to do something for you. And especially for neurodivergent children, compliance reduces conflict. So they're just like, okay, I'll do what you tell me to do. So compliance becomes their identity as they grow and mature. And these patterns, these trauma stress response patterns, you know, there's one main one typically, and then a secondary one, and then a little one, third one that's usually further down the line. Based on the work that I do with couples, this is what I'm finding, and individuals. So compliance becomes their identity. They just want to be good. They want to follow the rules. And quite frankly, for many people that are neurodivergent, they're like, I don't understand the rules. The rules weren't made for me. I'm just so confused. Just tell me what to do and I'll do it. However, when they build their identity on safety, it's not the same as being authentic. So, spiral layer one invites us to gently separate these two. So, I'm going to give you 3 tools to work with Fawn. Tool number 1, notice the body before you say yes. Before agreeing to something, please pause. Ask, what's my body doing? Is my chest tight? Do I feel like I'm rushing? Am I just trying to be compliant? Fawn moves super fast. Awareness slows it down. So, can you see how many people who have ADHD, Fawn feels normal, right? Because many people who have ADHD, hyperactive, impulsive, and or combined, they move fast. Okay, tool number 2, practice the micro pause. Instead of immediate agreement, say the words, let me think about it. This sentence protects your nervous system without creating conflict. It gives you back your freedom to choose whatever you want to do. And then tool number 3, separate kindness from self-abandonment. Kindness says, I want to help. Fawn says, I have to help or something bad will happen. Can you feel the difference in the two of those? That even as I say it out loud, one feels really grounded. The other one feels urgent. Notice which one is present. So if your value has been built on being needed, this totally makes sense. Absolutely. Your nervous system learned that usefulness preserved your connection, typically with your primary caregivers, whoever they were, parents, grandparents, aunts and uncles, anyone who took care of you. But you're allowed to be connected without disappearing. You're allowed to be supported. And before I go a little bit further today, if you're listening to this podcast for the first time and you haven't listened to my first podcast of 2026 that explains the neurodivergent spiral of life, I invite you to go back and listen to it. It's a spiral that I've created that's focused on safety, sensory awareness, and early regulation. It's a computation of a lot of other work out there in the world. I'm just putting it together in a way that makes sense both to me as a neurodivergent person and to my clients. So there's also handouts that I've created that accompany the neurodivergent spiral of life. So just go to my website, sign up for my mailing list, and you'll get free copies of those. So right now I've got 3 that I've created, pain awareness zones, the sensory ladder tracker and ritual builder, and then another one called When I First Felt Different. Please just go take those, downloads. Those are free gifts from me to you. I want you to have them so you can understand what I'm talking about more. And I'll continue creating more resources as we go further into the different layers of the neurodivergent spiral. So please feel free to do that. So I want to go back and share a little bit of a story. So when a client began practicing the micropause, one of the tools that I just gave you, they noticed that something subtly shifted. At first, that micropause felt terrifying. But slowly, she noticed the people who valued her stayed. They didn't leave. And the relationships that required constant self-erasure of herself, like that she had to disappear, they started revealing themselves clearly. That clarity wasn't loss, it was alignment. So again, I want to offer you 3 home play ideas this week. Number 1, notice 1 automatic yes. Number 2, notice and practice 1 micro pause. And if you like to journal, feel free to journal on this prompt. What am I afraid of? What am I afraid will happen when I say no? No fixing, no noticing. And what I've created is an opportunity to explore these topics in different ways. So, this episode of my podcast actually follows another blog that I have on my website. And this blog is entitled The Fawn Response in Neurodivergent People: Why You People Please to Say Safe. So I invite you to go to my website, www.loveontheautismspectrum.com, and go ahead and read that podcast. Read that blog post. In addition, I'm also just started being on Substack. So if you'd like to read more, so let me just explain. The blog is very much more psychoeducation, clinical, um, real examples. This podcast is talking about a little bit more relational, how we do this with couples and individuals. And then Substack, which you'll find under my name, Blaze Lazzaroni on Substack. And then you can also find Love on the Autism Spectrum. This week's entitled The Exhaustion of Being the Easy One. And it really goes into even more relational conversation. It's almost like how I describe them is like my poetic musings. I've been a writer for a long time and do a lot of poetry. And this is just another way of me expressing myself about these topics. So they all flow together. So as we wrap up today, I just want to say fawning isn't a weakness. It's a protection that worked. And now, gently, you're allowed to choose something different. Mm? And I'll see you next week. Be gentle with yourself and take care. Be well. Bye now.